Hey everybody, Dr. Robin here. I brought Jocelyn back for another conversation. As you saw last week, this kind of rhythm that we're getting into is that after I talk to our outside guest, we have some additional thoughts and have a chance to go a little deeper on some things. Jocelyn is actually a bit of an expert on this week's topic. She actually recently did a whole workshop on boundaries, so she's able to bring in some of her additional knowledge to us. So, Jocelyn, thank you for jumping in with us on this, and I'm excited to get to talk with you a little bit more about boundaries today.
Of course, yes. This is kind of my bread and butter. I love talking about boundaries with clients and such. Something that I kept coming back to when I was going over the material was the importance of communication styles in the context of boundary setting. And so there's four types of communication styles. There's aggressive, passive aggressive, and assertive. And so, what passive looks like is kind of how we typically think of people pleasing, where you kind of push aside your own values, your own needs to satisfy the other person. And so, that what that can look like is you stay quiet, you say yes to a situation, even though you're uncomfortable about it. And it's typically giving into what the other person wants, even though it violates what your wants and needs are at that time
Yeah, and
and what aggressive
if I
communication
could
styles
jump
can
in,
look
if
like.
I can jump in real quick on that.
Oh,
When you
yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
When you mentioned passive, I think that's a lot of what Professor Dana and I were talking about in the first video, because I think we both have a history of leaning into that a little bit, of being the people pleasers who want to take care of others' needs because we've been socialized to do that. And so the journey that we've been on, I think, has been from being very passive and accepting what happens around us and not pushing on things or setting limits into learning that it's okay to set some limits. And I'm going to guess that that's probably the journey that a lot of folks in our class are on. So, first of all, thank you for naming that passive type, because for a lot of us, I think, who've just been socialized to be kind people or to take care of others, we we may fall into being passive. Um, but even for those of us in that role, I think we need to be able to recognize the other types that might show up around us. We might be in a relationship with someone who embodies one of these other types, and we're going to have these in one of our posts. And we also have a chance to check ourselves to see if maybe we fall into one of these other ones sometimes, being aggressive or passive aggressive. So glad you're outlining all of this for us. And excuse me for jumping
Yes.
in there, but I wanted to kind of
No,
frame for our students.
please cut me off. I love the feedback and the conversation. Yeah, me myself, I typically fall into the passive realm where I am a big people pleaser. I think it's big culturally in my family as a woman. As a mixed woman who is Chinese, it's very common in my culture to people please, right? You're there to serve the family, serve the people. And so it's typical to push your wants and needs aside for the betterment of everybody else. And so to me, that's like, natural go-to. And so when I had come across this, I was like, oh my God, there are some times where I am uncomfortable with something and I say yes because I'm kind of expected to, or in my mind, I think I have to and that there is no other choice. And I'm actually putting down my wants and needs and values to satisfy somebody else. So for me, this was really eye-opening to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that I fall into this passive realm of communication styles.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about that. And that's a good segue, I think, into the other types that we might recognize around us, or a few people in our class might see themselves in some of these other types. So it's good that we're mapping them all out there and not just the passive.
Yes. So the next one would be aggressive. And so this is typically when we see people who overstep on other people's boundaries. They overstep on other people's values to satisfy their own needs and wants. And so this can look like, coercing somebody into saying yes. It can be saying insults, mean things, cussing out. It can even be just tone or body language. You don't have to verbally say aggressive things, but your body language and your tone or your face can communicate that there is aggression. Um, and so that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. And right in the middle is passive aggressive. And that's when it looks like something's passive. It looks like they're okay with the situation, but underneath the subtle message is that it is aggressive. And this can kind of look like um, maybe they're smiling, but what they really mean is they're unhappy with the situation. Could even be sly little comments, backhanded compliments, things like that. And so those are the kind of the three different areas where either your boundaries are being violated or you're violating somebody else's boundaries. Now,
Mhm.
what we would hope for is to learn how to be assertive. And this is kind of that sweet spot where you're able to clearly communicate your wants and needs. I feel this, I want this, clearly communicating your feelings, your wants and needs, but not expecting from the other person um, that they, let me see,
Like not,
without violating the other person's boundaries, right?
yeah,
So
like not
let's
expecting
say,
full compliance 100% without discussing it because we know they
yes,
have their needs too. So we're putting that on the table. Like, I know you have your needs. I have my needs. Let's figure this out. But to recognize mine are as valid as yours, I think is a big part of the journey for a lot of us. And as you're sharing those, the aggressive and passive aggressive, I think for some of us, that may even play out in terms of who we've had in our environments, maybe in our families or our partners who are those other two, the aggressive or passive aggressive. Like when you shared passive aggressive, I thought, oh, that was my mother. Like she would kind of smile, but a little bit of a strained smile and say something was fine. And then I would learn later that she was upset about it and she might actually blow up about it later. And so I had to learn that when she said something was okay, it didn't necessarily mean it was okay. And how to kind of figure out the meaning behind what she was saying, which probably played out a lot in me becoming a people pleaser, right? Like the dance happens between two people. Or I can think about relationships I've been in that maybe weren't completely healthy because a partner was more the aggressive type of just like, this is how it will be because this is what I want. And there wasn't room for the negotiation. And of course, I'm framing a lot of this in what I'm sharing in terms of the other person being one of those. But as you were alluding to, we also have a chance to double check that we're not stepping into the role of aggression or passive aggression where we're manipulating people around us. There's a way to stand up for what we want and need in a way that's healthy and acknowledges, like I said, kind of the validity of our needs, but the validity of other people's needs. And what does that look like?
yes. And I think it's important when we're setting those boundaries to take into consideration, is this the right time to be bringing this up? Does this person even have the capacity to be talking about what we're talking about right now? The boundary you're setting, is it appropriate for the relationship that you're in? Um, is it, let's see, right time, appropriate in the relationship? And is it kind of an equal balance? Are you giving as much as you're taking, right? There's a whole list, there's a list of 10 ways to analyze whether or not to set a boundary, how to set a boundary. I can link that to you. Um, as well as another one that we were just talking about previously, the Dear Man is an excellent way to assess how you're communicating your boundary and to make sure that you're staying on topic. You're not mixing in too many, I don't want to say emotions, but sometimes when we're very heated or emotional about setting a boundary, that can deviate us from the goal of this situation happened, it hurt me, it upset me. Let's find a solution. Sometimes if we stick too much to the emotions, it can deviate us away from the goal at hand. And so
Yeah.
we'll link those two for the students in the class. We'll link those two so you can check them out and have a better understanding of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I like that point you're making at the end there that is sometimes if it's already been a little emotional, like we might already be bothered about something that's happened repeatedly and we've been debating whether to articulate this boundary or this need. And because we've built that up, then by the time we talk about it, the emotions are really loaded and they can kind of blah all over the place. So there's a, am I in the right place for this right now? Or am I actually very worked up? And it would be better for me to be calm and in a positive mood when I express this. There's what's happening for that other person right now. And are they in a space where they might be overloaded or emotional? And would it be better for me to wait until we're both in the right space for this? There's a consideration of myself, consideration of the other, right? And then maybe we should dive a little bit more into that Dear Man. That's an acronym, right?
Yes.
And we'll post that, but maybe we could even talk a little bit about those. Um,
Yes. And so if you guys want to pull up we'll link the worksheet, but if you want to pull it up so it makes better sense for you to follow along what we're talking about, the Dear Man is an acronym. It stems from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And the main goal of DBT, just a quick overview, is just how to improve your interpersonal relationships and how to control your emotions so you're not reactive. And so Dear Man is an acronym, and it's kind of a way to help communicate boundaries. And so the D stands for describe. And so you're describing the situation that happened. Hey, you came home late. And express, the E in express, you came home late and that made me upset or that made me anxious.
yeah. If
And
I
so I stayed up all night worrying about you.
worrying. Yeah. This has actually happened between me and my partner where he's late and I'm not possessive, I'm not controlling, but I might be worried that he's been in an accident, right? And I'm going, oh shoot, is he on the side of the road? Should I be checking with hospitals? So it's not necessarily coming from a controlling place, but it's a, is he all right place? And to have to learn to
Exactly.
articulate that. Yeah.
Hmm. The A stands for assert. And so it can be, hey, you came home late. It made me nervous. I was up all night worrying about you. Could you please call me to let you know when you're going to be late? That way I'm not staying up late worrying about you.
What I noticed what you
The
just said was there is a simple request without that request getting very loaded.
Yes, realistic request that isn't overburdening the other person.
Yeah, very practical.
Um, R for reinforce. And so reinforce can be, um, if you were to call me, then I wouldn't be up all night worrying, or we would have less of these arguments
Mhm.
where we're going back and forth about you coming home late.
If I could
You
jump
want
in
to
that,
reinforce
yeah.
that there's benefit in you following this.
Exactly. I was gonna say, pardon me, like reinforced actually comes from behavioral psychology, and it's the idea that there's
Hmm.
something positive that comes out of it, because often as soon as we're negotiating something, the whole thing feels so negative. So to reinforce is to say something good would come out of this for us. So there's something positive to look forward to. We're framing it positively. There's a benefit.
Right? Reinforce could be, oh, if you let me know when you're going to be home, I can better plan when we have dinner, or we won't be up all night arguing like we normally do. Something in it for them to engage in that behavior. M stands for being mindful. And so, again, that's staying on the topic when we're heated and emotional, especially if you've had kind of a lot of problems building up. It's really easy to deviate from the subject at hand. So when we're establishing that boundary, just making sure you kind of stick to, hey, what we're talking about is you coming home late and how that affected me and what solution can we come to based off this instead of, oh, not only were you late, but you also didn't do the dishes and the laundry's still wet and all these things and it can get messy and then you're completely off topic and you're just emotional and heated. So when you're setting that boundary, make sure you're sticking to the goal at hand.
Mhm.
A stands for appearing confident. And so this is like it says, appearing confident, maintaining eye contact, having, chest out, shoulders out. Of course, doing it in a way that's culturally congruent for you, whatever makes sense culturally for you. But just to communicate that you are setting that boundary, instead of whispering it or saying it sheepishly, people might take it that you aren't serious about setting that boundary. So show that this is important to you and that you are wanting to follow through with this.
Yeah, if I could
And
jump in.
lastly,
Can I jump in on
oh,
that
go
one real
ahead.
quick when you say appear confident? Because even those words I almost don't resonate with very well. But that's been a big part of my journey, I'll share, is to not apologize if I'm naming a need or
Mm,
a boundary. That my history is to say, I'm so sorry, but could you maybe? So when I
mhm.
contextualize that with I'm sorry, and even my body language, you're talking about body language, and it's funny because as I did that, I think like my shoulders shrunk. So we've already, if we start with an apology and shrinking, it's like we've already framed this as if it's a problem, if it's something we need to be sorry for. So even though I wrestle with the appear confident, I think it's actually a very useful frame because it's not being controlling or pushy. It's just not being apologetic that I'm naming a boundary or a need.
Mhm. Exactly. And when you're doing those things of, because I've been so guilty of that where, oh, I'm so sorry, like it just, you don't have to, but if you want to, this might help. And that's kind of a mixed message because
Mhm.
are you upset and you want this boundary to be established, or are you kind of loosey-goosey about it? So
Yeah. And
when
in a,
you're clear about your message, it's clear for the other person as well that you're serious about this and you want to follow through with it.
yeah, I like that. Clarity.
Mhm. And lastly is negotiate. And I think this is important, especially in relationships where, earlier we mentioned you came home late, made me upset and worried. Can you call me next time? Okay, maybe calling doesn't work for that other person. It's a bit burdensome. Maybe they have bad connection in the office, who knows? So instead, hey, when you get the chance, can you instead shoot me a text? Or something that's a little more accessible for them. And if none of your suggestions are sticking with them, you could also turn it around and say, well, how would you like to solve the situation? What are your ideas, right? Collaborating together to make a solution together.
Yeah, I like that. And again, if I kind of connect that to my partner, like I've been very mindful at the same time that if he's out with a friend, for example, I don't want to interfere with the fact that he's having a good time with a friend, or if he's working really hard. Sometimes he has to work really late, crazy hours, and I know he's dedicated to his work, and I don't want to be an interruption to the work. So we did exactly that, where we sort of negotiated of, hey, it helps me to know that you're okay, that you're safe, but I also don't want to interrupt you in your work time. So what does that look like for us? Um, and I think that those show up in so many different ways. I keep contextualizing this one with a partner, but they show up with parents, they show up with friends, they show up for those in the class who are parents, they show up with your kids that
Mhm.
um, that can actually be very healthy to name something to a child. And then especially, when you think as your child is becoming a preteen and a teen, to bring them into this healthy conversation where you're figuring things out together, or workplace, colleagues, this shows up everywhere.
Yes, exactly. And I love what you brought up is that, it's we keep using relationships because it's so emotional and close to us that it's kind of the go-to, but you can use this in your relationship with your classmates or your teachers or even at work. It might look a little different how you communicate because those are different power dynamics, and so keeping that in mind. But yes, this can be used in any situation, in any different setting, to set and establish those boundaries.
Yeah, these can relate to things like whether or not we answer emails after work or take work calls on
Mhm.
the weekends, or they so many places that boundaries show up that if we take that back to what Professor Dana was saying in the other conversation, it's like where our fences are, and that we have to honor that fence. And something we were talking about is how that feels for her. She said it's an electric fence, so she'll actually get a little electrified. My feeling is a little yuck. I'll go like, oh, I think I just let a boundary get crossed because I feel a little icky right now. Whatever that feeling is our clue that, oh, maybe this isn't quite healthy for me right now. Then what does it mean to make it healthy and engage the other person in a way that's also healthy for them and it's respectful in both directions?
Exactly.
Thank you for giving us more tools to do that, making it more practical. And I'll also bring back something we were saying in the other conversation, which is that that doesn't mean it goes perfectly 100% of the time. So having to know that we had a right to name it and we were healthy for naming it, even if the outcome wasn't perfect. So sometimes the other person engages in a thoughtful way and we go, oh, that was really productive. I feel good. I'm glad I did that. Sometimes the other person might not have a healthy reaction. That doesn't mean that it was bad that I named a need or a boundary or a limit. So having to know that it's healthy to respect our own boundaries and to continue to work on engaging in healthy ways and reward ourselves for that. To go back to the idea of reinforcing, I think reinforce ourselves for making the effort to do that in a healthy, thoughtful way.
Yes. Something I want to say before we wrap up is just, when you're new to setting boundaries, it can be challenging. It can be really difficult. It feels weird. It's awkward. I'm still working on it after years of trying to, get better at it. And so extending that self-compassion toward yourself, our theme, and giving yourself some grace because it can be challenging. And there may be times where you do revert back to that passivity. You do go back to the people pleasing, or sometimes you're tired, you're stressed, and you snap at somebody, you're aggressive or you're passive aggressive. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's okay. It's an ongoing journey that's going to be filled with a lot of lumps and bumps along the way. So don't beat yourself up about it. It's a long journey. And so that's all I wanted to say in case any students are going to be really strict on themselves about, oh, now I have to be assertive and set my boundaries. It's okay that it's complicated and it takes time. It's a skill that you have to build over time.
100%. And I'm glad you mentioned self-compassion because that might be a little teaser for one of our topics in the coming weeks. So thank you for taking your time with us today, Jocelyn. Students, both Jocelyn and I will be looking forward to your comments and your conversations with each other in the coming weeks. We'll put some activities in there as well. And we will look forward to continuing to be in virtual community with you about this. Have a good week.
Bye.